Politicking continues in the UK as the country edges closer towards a no-deal Brexit, with a former senior official accusing British Prime Minister Boris Johnson of trying to disrupt chances of a new deal.
Now, ex-chancellor Philip Hammond said Mr Johnson was trying to scupper things by making demands the European Union could never accept.
To set the bar for negotiations so high that we inevitably leave without a deal would be a betrayal, and the Prime Minister said he would get a deal, and we want to see him deliver that deal.
The EU has consistently insisted it will not reopen negotiations on the divorce deal. The UK is set to leave the EU at the end of October, and Mr Johnson has pledged to stick to the deadline, deal or no deal.
Natalie Powell is joining us live from London with the very latest on that. Natalie, it looks like this Brexit battle is brewing again.
Certainly those battle lines being drawn. Perhaps nowhere is that more evident in that tete-a-tete that we've seen between the ex-chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, and 10 Downing Street. Philip Hammond, of course, accusing 10 Downing Street, saying the government has no intention of renegotiating that deal with the EU, and actually saying that he believes MPs could block a no deal from happening. He's actually said that any plans for the government to try to bypass Parliament in that and therefore force through a no deal would amount to a constitutional crisis. Now, Downing Street has hit back at the Chancellor, suggesting that he is really trying to frustrate the Brexit process in order to keep the UK within the EU. But he himself has said that he's actually voted 3 times for Brexit for Theresa May's deal, but each of those times, of course, as we know, have not passed. Now, of course, he's not alone in this. He is one of 20 MPs that have written to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, saying that the UK's red lines on Brexit means that the EU is not going to renegotiate a new deal. We've heard that time and time again from the EU. Boris Johnson, of course, has said that he wants to renegotiate a deal, but if he can't get one, he will leave do or die by the 31st of October. And in addition to all of this, we've also heard from the Speaker, John Bercow, who has said that he will do everything in his power to stop the government from shutting down Parliament in order to end up in a no-deal scenario.
Well, Natalie, adding to the tension, perhaps, reports suggest that the current administration wants to hold snap elections. How likely is that?
Yeah, that's right, and it does seem that the UK is on a little bit of an election footing at the moment. We've seen the government announce a lot of funding for the National Health Service, for police. All of that goes down pretty well with voters. We've also seen government aides having their holidays cancelled, which is another indication. And today, Prime Minister Boris Johnson will give a Facebook Live, a sort of people's PMQs, if you like, where he'll be asked questions by the public. So all of this sort of suggesting that the government is potentially on an election footing. Interestingly, Boris Johnson has long said that he's no intention on calling a general election. He would rather focus on getting Brexit done. Now, in terms of where the polling is, well, it really depends on who you ask. Of course, most of the polling has been done by places either leaning towards the left or leaning towards the right. Some are suggesting that Boris Johnson could win comfortably, and of course, at the moment, he only has a majority of 1, so potentially that may be one of the reasons why he calls for a general election. But we also have seen recently in by-elections this Remain alliance forming between the parties that want to remain in the EU, meaning that that Remainer vote is not spread among them but goes to one of those parties in particular. So we could well see those coming up with the same kind of tactics if another general election is called once again.
OK, thanks for getting us up to speed with all things Brexit. Natalie Powell there speaking just from London.